Only a couple of days ago, it looked like Iran and the US might finally be headed towards some sort of deal. On Tuesday, Trump's special envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner held a round of much-anticipated talks with their Iranian counterparts in Geneva. Afterwards, both sides suggested that the meeting had gone relatively well. Iran's foreign minister said that they'd agreed upon, quote, a set of guiding principles, while US officials admitted that some progress had been made, and the two parties apparently agreed to another round of talks in the near future. However, in the past 48 hours or so, the mood music has soured dramatically. The US has accelerated its military build-up in the region, and on Wednesday, Axios published a report citing a number of sources inside the White House, which claimed that Trump was leaning towards, quote, a massive weeks-long campaign that would look more like a full-fledged war than last month's pinpoint operation in Venezuela. In that report, a White House source is also quoted saying, the boss is getting fed up. I think there's a 90% chance we see kinetic action in the next few weeks. So in this video, we're going to explain why a US-Iran war suddenly looks really quite likely, and try our best to figure out how it might go down. If you've read George Orwell's 1984, you might remember the book's three powerful superstates, covering today's US, Russia, and China. In the latest issue of our magazine, we're considering how these Orwellian spheres of influence are taking shape, and whether we're entering a new age of empires. That's just one of the 72 pages in the magazine, because as always, there's more to Too Long than you'd expect. Purchase your copy by clicking the link in the description. As we see it, there are two big reasons, well, apart from the fact that a whole load of well-informed reporters are talking about it, to think that further US strikes on Iran are now pretty inevitable. The first reason is the massive military buildup that we've seen over the past couple of days. Since Tuesday, the US has been hurriedly redeploying a whole load of assets from its bases in the US and Europe to Iran's near abroad, including hundreds of fighter jets, 2 aircraft carrier strike groups, and perhaps most notably, dozens of refueling tankers, which would suggest that Trump is prepping for a prolonged air campaign, not just a series of isolated strikes. The US has even sent the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, and the same one that was used in the operation in Venezuela, towards the region, and it's due to arrive there by the start of next week. It's really hard to overstate the magnitude of this mobilization. This is probably the largest US deployment in the region since the lead up to the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. Of course, there are also clear echoes here to what happened before the US's intervention in Venezuela. Then there was a massive naval buildup. Lots of people wish-cast that it was just some elaborate bluff, and then it turned out not to be a bluff. Something similar also happened around Russia's troop buildup around Ukraine in 2021. Back then, there were lots of clever theories about how this could all just be an elaborate bluff, but, well, it wasn't. The point we're trying to make is that build-ups of this magnitude almost always precede actual military action, not least because it becomes difficult to demobilize without losing face. So that's the first reason, the massive military build-up, which bodes ill given what happened in Venezuela last month. The second reason, though, is that, to put it bluntly, negotiations don't seem to be going anywhere. According to reports, negotiations are faltering over the issue of uranium enrichment. Trump and co. are demanding that Iran give up all domestic enrichment capabilities, on the grounds that any enrichment facilities could be used to produce weapons-grade, highly enriched uranium. While Iran insists on at least some enrichment capabilities, both because it doesn't want to be dependent on imported uranium and because Iran thinks it's entitled to domestic nuclear facilities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which states that non-nuclear states have a right to the production and use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes without discrimination. To make things even more difficult, the US has apparently tried to expand the scope of negotiations to include Iran's proxy network and its missile stockpiles, demanding that Iran withdraw all support from groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, and accept limits on the size and range of its ballistic missile program. Here, Trump is presumably thinking that given that the Iranian regime is in a weaker position than it was last year, he'll thus be able to squeeze more concessions out of them. But while it's probably true that the regime is weaker than it was, last year's war didn't go well for them, their regional proxies have been degraded, and they're currently in the midst of an acute economic crisis, this doesn't seem to have made them more willing to compromise. If anything, the opposite seems to have happened, because the regime just don't have the political space or capital to make embarrassing concessions. Now, you might argue that this is too pessimistic. After all, another round of negotiations is penciled in for next month, and only last week, Trump apparently told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's unsurprisingly quite keen on military action, to let him continue with his negotiations. However, history doesn't bode well here, and there are, once again, clear echoes of the past. In early June, the US and Iran were, as they are today, struggling to find a way around the familiar stumbling block of uranium enrichment. At the time, Trump insisted on continued negotiations, and on June 12th, he explicitly warned Netanyahu not to strike Iran. That led many people to conclude, as they have today, that the odds of US military action against Iran were pretty low, at least for the foreseeable future. But less than 2 weeks later, on June 22nd, the US was dropping bunker buster bombs on Iran's nuclear facilities, and Trump was triumphantly bragging about their alleged obliteration. You get the point. Negotiations look unlikely to succeed, and recent history suggests that Trump's rhetorical commitment to continued dialogue doesn't preclude military action in the near future. So if the US does strike Iran, what might this actually look like? Well, no one knows for sure, but it's pretty clear that Trump's primary objective will be regime change in Iran, which is something that Trump has openly flirted with on a number of occasions in the recent past. This might either take the form of a massive bombing campaign designed to destabilize the state, or a more targeted attempt against the Ayatollah, like we saw against Maduro in Venezuela. Either way, if Trump succeeds, and that is a big if, he'll be left with a similar dilemma to the one he faced in Venezuela. He can either try and replace the Ayatollah with a more pro-Western alternative, presumably Reza Pahlavi, the son of the last Shah, or just let another regime insider step up and hope that they'll be more pliant. In Venezuela, Trump plumped for option 2. The leader of Venezuela's internationally recognized opposition, Maria Corina Machado, has apparently been sidelined, and the administration seems content with doing business with Maduro's vice president, Delcy Rodriguez. Maybe something similar will happen in Iran, but it's worth noting that unlike in Venezuela, most of the Ayatollah's most obvious successors are at least as hardline as he is. Clearly, the current state of the world is plagued by uncertainty and risk. And just while you've been watching this video, your personal information may have been sold or published online without you even knowing about it. And you might just think, well, what's the harm in a few spam calls? But unfortunately, it's not that simple. It might be scary, but scams and identity theft both start with your personal data being exposed online. So that's why we turn to Incogni. Incogni expertly tracks down and removes your data from multiple sites so that your personal information can't be bought or sold by bad actors online. No longer will your data pop up on online directories, people's search sites, or commercial databases for everyone to see and abuse. They work on your behalf to request your personal data removal, and even conduct repeated removal requests so that you can remain in control. You can even send Incogni sites that expose your data, and they'll send removal requests on your behalf, or assist in you opting out on your own with their custom removals feature. And it's even impacting parts of your life that you never thought about. For example, your health insurance could actually raise your rates just based on your online activity, particularly the data that you enter into health apps. Insurance companies can easily buy that data and decide for themselves just how healthy you are, without you even getting a say. From your phone number to your political affiliation, Incogni can help you find it all and remove it from the internet for good, keeping you protected from the threats you might not even be aware of. Because if they can't find you, they can't harm you. There's no better time to start protecting yourself. So create an account with our link in the description, grant Incogni the ability to work on your behalf, and sit back as they make you safer. Plus, by using code TLDR News at checkout, you can get an exclusive 60% off their annual Incogni plan. And there's absolutely no risk either with their 30-day money-back guarantee.